Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 641. I'm Tom Cagley, your host. In the podcast this week, we discuss the Agile Coaching Code of Ethics and the process of building an ethical foundation. Shane Hastie and Craig Smith have been leading the effort to craft a useful Agile Coaching Code of Ethics for the past year. These two thought leaders have helped pull together a diverse group of coaches and then guide that herd of cats in order to create a new force to guide Agile coaches of all stripes. In May 2017, Shane Hastie joined ICAgile as the Director of Agile Learning Programs, tasked with ensuring the learning objectives remain valid and useful, supporting the various communities that make up the ICAgile ecosystem, and seeking ways to advance the state of Agile learning. In November 2019, he moved into the Director of Community Development role, building and supporting the global community of thought leaders, members, instructors, certification holders. Contact information, links in the show notes. Craig Smith has been active in the IT industry for over 15 years. He's been an Agile practitioner for over 10 years and a certified Scrum Master and a member of both the Scrum Alliance and Agile Alliance. And as an Agile coach, he has worked on a number of high-profile technical and business projects. He regularly conducts Agile training and has presented at a number of Australian and international conferences. He is also an Agile editor for InfoQ and hosts an Agile podcast called The Agile Revolution, which is in my personal podcast rotation. Again, links in the show notes. Craig Smith, Shane Hastie, welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast. This has been a long time coming.
Tom, thanks for having us.
Hey, great to see you, Tom.
Yeah, and we can see, so that's the bad thing about audio is nobody knows that we're, making faces at us, trying to make each other laugh.
Great to hear you, Tom.
And I'm good with laughing. All right, so gentlemen, you have been leading an effort to create an Agile coaching code of ethics. So before we dive into how that all came about and what that all means, let's start because, I think ethics is something that everybody, I think, thinks they know what that means, but everybody has a different perception as to what that definition is. So before we go, how do you define ethics?
I'm going to quote the BBC. At its simplest, ethics is a system of moral principles. They affect how people make decisions and lead their lives. Ethics is concerned with what is good for individuals and society, and it's also described as a moral philosophy. The BBC has a really good series on ethics that they put together years ago that's worth exploring.
Yeah, I think I'll build on that. What Shane said, it's the fabric that makes sure that you're doing what's right, or allows you to know when things aren't right.
The latter is something that we could probably tattoo on ourselves. The former, while I think is a great definition, is hard to remember. I'm actually extremely impressed, Shane, that you've actually internalized that and can rattle that off.
I was reading.
Oh, you had to spoil it. Okay, excellent, good. Because
transparency and openness.
Well, there you go. That's part of all this. So, gentlemen, how did you get to the point where this was important enough for you to get involved in a leadership point of view to help shape and help drive an Agile code of ethics?
It's a story that goes a long way back, doesn't it, Shane?
It's 2-3 years now when we first started talking about it. Craig and I have both been involved with Agile coaching. I work for ICAgile, and ICAgile has an Agile coaching track. And one of the things that came up over and over again is examples of bad Agile coaching. Behaviors that we could see felt wrong, but it was hard to actually hold a ruler against it and say, why is this bad? What's wrong here? Examples that we hear about are the coach who comes in working with a team, with an organization, and who then prolongs the engagement, even though it's not necessarily, they're no longer adding value. But of course, they're, particularly with the external coach funded on an hourly basis, you want to keep the contract. The imposition of a particular framework or approach versus the invitation approach. Now, Craig and I were certainly not the first people that spoke about this. It's come up in the Agile coaching community since at least 2005, 2006. Lisa Adkins certainly has commented on it upon occasion. Dan Mezek has written a lot of really powerful stuff about particularly that imposition versus invitation approach. We saw some stuff and we picked up, what could be done about it. Craig?
Yeah, I think building on what you said, it's also as someone who both is a educator of coaches and someone who is often asked to, perhaps recommend or find them for for different coaching opportunities. It was starting to concern me and others around us, just the level of coaching, particularly as organizations started to really start to move on their Agile journey. And as the first round of, the first Agilists, as we often refer to them, started to move through and leave the team things behind, there was a lot of, 10-second team people who had experience in one team who then were hanging their shingle out and calling themselves a coach. And so in recent years, there's been a lot of, criticism about the role and, how do you know that you've got, somebody who knows what they're talking about? And the certifications have gone a long way to that. One of the reasons I did ICAgile, and particularly the ICAgile expert coaching level, was that, there was a level of maturity to show that you passed that bar. But nonetheless, there's nothing that shows any different essentially to a potential employer between me and someone who's got 3 minutes experience. And what we were really seeing was that those people were starting to do real harm in the space. And so that was it's now starting to affect how people view agility, and that was a little concerning. And so Shane and I, we've been speaking about this for a little while, but it was at the Agile 2019 conference, I think, in DC. Yeah. When we, it might have been a little before that, but it was that conference that we really sat down and started to nut out and go, hey, we could do something with this. And the nice thing is the Agile Alliance has a facility where members can suggest initiatives. Because one of the things was that a few people had a go at this at conferences and in small groups, but they hadn't made a lot of traction. And one of the things is how could we do something that actually had some traction and made a bit of a difference in the community? And that's one of the reasons why we raised a member initiative. And then, Shane's wonderful Rolodex, we started to pat some people on the back and go, are you interested in joining us? And some did, some didn't, but some suggested other folks to come along. And we've got a band of, almost 30 volunteers now, who are coming along and a lot of great feedback starting to come through as well.
Sit down in-person conferences? Come on, that's a science fiction, right?
No, it's history. It was 2019.
Okay, I buy that. History. Maybe it's science fiction going forward. Who knows? Okay, so you did it through the Agile Alliance. How are, so Agile Alliance, ICAgile, Scrum.org, there are any number of organizations. How have they helped shape this, or have they stayed in the background?
Well, the Agile Alliance sees themselves and holds themselves up as the umbrella body, and they very deliberately stay out of the certification space. But the Alliance did agree with us and saw the need for this. So the board of the Alliance supported the initiative. They let us go ahead with it and put it under that banner. And that was really important because it does sit independent of any of the individual certification bodies. What's been really great, though, is most of the certification bodies, we've had volunteers on the team from those different bodies. So while it may not, none of them have yet endorsed it officially, but most of them have actually been engaged, have had people working with us on the team. So we're hopeful that one of the next steps is, in fact, to get those certification bodies to endorse the Code of Ethics, to at least bring into their education the topic of ethics. And we hope to actually point people to this Code of Ethical Conduct that we've come up with.
Code of Ethics, Code of Ethical Conduct. What's the difference between a Code of Ethics and a Code of Conduct? I know I've had a couple of early morning or late afternoon discussions on that topic myself.
We've officially called this a Code of Ethical Conduct for Agile Coaching. And it's about that behaving in an ethical way, hence the Code of Ethical Conduct. I will shorten it to Code of Conduct or Code of Ethics just because I'm lazy. The official designation, and maybe we should fix that at some point, but the Code of Ethical Conduct for Agile Coaching is how we've framed it. And it is about how people behave.
Don't you see that there might be a difference, at least in perception, between something that you call a code of conduct versus a code of ethics?
One of the conversations, so we're obviously quite early in this initiative. So our first job has been to draft that, you put that draft code out and some scenarios. There was a lot of conversation in the beginning about where does this actually go, and that's still conversation that is occurring, and we would welcome feedback on that. So when we talk about a code of ethics, that's the 18 points over the 9 subject areas that are in the one that you can read on the Agile Alliance website right now. The Code of Ethical Conduct goes a little further into what actually happens if you breach that. And one of the things we're still debating about is where's that line? Where do we want to draw that? If you draw parallels to something like the ICF, the International Coaching Federation, where there is that organization actually has a disciplinary process and a body, I guess, that can process people through that. So one of the things I guess we have to decide as a coaching community is, the first thing is putting this out there and getting people to abide by it. The second is, what do we want to do with it? How far do we want to take this?
How far do we want to take this?
Great question.
Yeah. Where could it go? At the very least, I hope that people read it and say, I can get on board with this. I would be comfortable to publicly state that this is how I will strive to behave. That's a starting point. Maybe there's an opportunity for people to publicly sign it. When the Agile Manifesto first came out, you could actually go to that website and you could sign it. Well, maybe there's going to be something like that. We're not sure yet. These are all potentials. I hope that organizations who are employing coaches are going to look for people who have signed the Code of Ethics or the Code of Ethical Conduct for Agile Coaching. We certainly would love to have the various certification bodies and the education bodies, at the very least, including it and pointing people towards it. Would it be possible to have certification dependent upon signing it? I don't know. These are all possibilities that are out there. And as Craig talks about, if we look at other organizations that are working in the professional space, the International Coach Federation, you sign the code of ethics when you become a member, when you get any of their certifications. And there is a disciplinary process. There's a complaints process. If somebody feels you have violated that code of ethics, there is a body within the group who will adjudicate, will take evidence and hear from the aggrieved party, hear from the coach, and will make a decision. Now, the worst they can do is cancel your accreditation as a coach. But if we look at some of the other professions, and when we were exploring and looking for inspiration right at the beginning of this initiative, we looked at the teaching profession, we looked at the medical profession. In those environments, those professions, there is a much harsher set of penalties. If you lose your accreditation, you lose the ability to call yourself that and to practice in that discipline, in that profession. Now, we're years away from anything like that, if we ever would want to get there. That's a question for the community at large. But you ask, where could it go?
Sure.
Those are some things where it could go.
So where is it right now? So right now, other than on the website, right, the Agile Alliance website, which we'll have a link to in the show notes, and we would like everybody to go and comment on. But it's to a point where a product is out there. It's describing behavior. It's that ethical code of conduct. What's there, and where do you feel that it is in its birth? Because it's new.
Yeah, so the second draft is out as we record this, and those drafts have been moving reasonably quickly. So there was a November 2020 draft, a January 2021 draft. I suspect there'll be another one in the very near future. And that code of ethical conduct, as I said, is 18 points, 9 subject areas, and has remained reasonably stable since the beginning. And one of the reasons behind that is it's borrowed heavily from a lot of a code of conduct. For the most part, there's a lot of similarities between things. It's the wording that changes a little bit. The thing that's been the harder thing for the team to do, and actually really has caused a lot of very interesting discussion, has been the scenarios that we've written alongside it to help people make sense of it, particularly as we're talking about as perhaps new people who are new to the profession, new to understanding ethics, can actually look at that and see what we consider to be ethics scenarios that are appropriate or inappropriate, or sometimes even in a grey area. And that's been the area of trying to make those things that are not only accessible and easy to read, for people to understand, but also creates that whole debate about where is that line and what does this actually mean. So that's the majority of the work that's happened up until this point.
I think it's actually been pretty amazing having sat in on some of those conversations. The richness that diversity of thought and geography has brought to the table. By the way, have we decided how we're spelling gray?
Yeah, depending on which part of the world you are, is it EY or AY? Who knows?
IY.
Document at the moment is AY.
So we've created this, and I'll say we because I've had a little hand in that, but I think there are so many people involved that without your hands on the tiller, I don't think it would have gone as quickly, or maybe anywhere. It might have been one of those boats that just sort of floats around in the ocean without someone's hand on the tiller. What has been the most surprising aspect of this endeavor to date for you two?
When we first started, there was a legitimate question: do we need this? Do we not just tell people to, join the International Coach Federation and follow and sign up to that? Or there's a global coaching code of ethics that you could sign on to. There is the International Association of Facilitators. So all of these bodies exist. So there was a genuine and legitimate question: do we need something new? And when we had that discussion and that debate amongst what was the original volunteer team of about 12 or 15 people. So we started with a reasonably large group. We actually fairly quickly came to the conclusion that there is something distinctly different from all of those other coaching approaches and all of the other organizations that sort of sit in relatively aligned, but that there is something different in Agile coaching, and that was the deliberate and conscious bias towards agility, to the foundation in the values and principles of the Agile Manifesto, and that being one of our underlying drivers and guides. So for me, it was a really interesting, deep conversation. It went on for a few weeks, and we did go out. We looked at the various bodies' codes of ethics that were out there, and we were inspired by many of them. And you will see similarities. We acknowledge that we have been inspired by them, and have in fact approached them and said, is it okay if we borrow from you? And they've all been very generous and said, sure, just acknowledge us. So I certainly want to acknowledge that we were deeply inspired by what was out there. We were building on things. So it was kind of surprising to me that we couldn't just borrow something that was already there. And then Craig mentioned the deep conversations around the scenarios. It's interesting. The easy ones are easy. That's bad or that's good. The gray.
Oh my!
I recall
GRAY, gray.
The ambiguity in some of the scenarios where we debated as a group. It would have been over a couple of weeks, at least 3 hours of, okay, what are the nuances here? How would I respond if this was me? What is happening? And you can see that in the scenarios document, because anything that is gray, there's a couple of paragraphs under the why, whereas for the appropriate and inappropriate, it's one line. So those things that have caused us to think deeply and to debate are what we hope we're really going to generate that debate in the community.
So do you think actually that those gray areas, just to pull on that just for a second, are really where that demarcation line between it's appropriate and inappropriate is sometimes cultural?
There will be cultural elements to it. There could be legal elements to it, and different legal jurisdictions can have an implication there. So there's all sorts of things to consider.
Yeah, legal can challenge one's behavior. I sometimes struggle with whether or not that should challenge one's ethics. But that's probably a topic for a different time. Craig, what has surprised you the most?
Yeah, I think just talking about that, the debate in the room, I almost wish if Shane could remember to hit record, that we could actually release that's an inside joke when we record our meetings. But if we could record those sessions, the debate, you can imagine, as we record this, we're in the month of the 20th anniversary of the manifesto, and you often, you see what came out of that, but the interesting thing is, how did that sausage get made in the first place, and what was the debate in the room, and some of those stories come out. This is kind of the same, the debate but the respect of the people in the room is, I shouldn't say surprising, but often when you get a bunch of extremely passionate people around a topic like this, it can go south pretty quickly. That hasn't happened in this group. It's been a wonderful environment so far to be part of, a wonderful group of people to work with, and it's kind of unfortunate in some ways that all they see is the output from that Whereas some of those intense debates about where a word goes or how we spell it or just those ethical things, and we've got such a diverse group of people now in this group as well. Just one of the conversations we were having just in the last session was now as we start to translate it, trying to translate it to a different language, what things that starts to bring up as you look at the wording. Just looking at things like the grammar and those type of things are the places that we're starting to go now, so that when people can read this in its final draft, that it actually does hold true and actually can be understood, not only in the English language that we started by writing it in, but hopefully push this out to all those areas of the world in different languages that are also have an agile coaching practice.
Yeah, our various forms of the English language. So, and for anyone who hasn't spent time internationally, that's not as easy as it sounds either. So, to be honest with you, having been privy to a few of those conversations, I have spent many a morning or many an afternoon, more mornings and afternoons, off stumbling around thinking about the conversation. So, to be honest with you, I think they've been life-changing just for me to, cause me to go think about something else for some period of time.
The other quick thing that was just interesting, I guess, was right at the start, Shane, you remember this, we debated about whether we even needed to define what agile coaching was. And the interesting thing is that debate went away reasonably quickly. We have a small definition, and there's still discussion about whether we need to do something there, but that was never something that was really up for conversation. We all agreed that was reasonably well defined in the spaces, which is kind of interesting because for a lot of folks, particularly who aren't in our community, really struggle to understand what a coach is. But when you start to look at things like the ethical code of conduct, that can actually help to answer that question. So that was I think an unintended consequence of this as well, is that even by reading this, it starts to answer that question about what is actually a coach when you actually go and look at what are the ethical behaviors that you should expect.
Arguably, I would love people who are writing position descriptions and then the HR folks that actually go out and hire people to actually understand what an agile coach is. I talked to someone about a role recently that the answer was, well, we want you to come in here and tell people exactly what to do and be very prescriptive.
The agile consultant.
I don't even know it's like. It would be hard pressed for me to call that a consultant. Agile dictator, maybe.
What do you do? Do you just stand in front of the room and read page 7 of the Scrum Guide today? Today we will read.
Ooh, I could see that. There's probably the movie Brazil has a scene where a bunch of people are in a room and somebody is reading from the doctrine manual. That would be really a great way to get people to be innovative and agile and get stuff done and be motivated. Maybe not. Gentlemen, we could probably go on for a long time and in depth. Let's start with, how can people find out about the Agile Code of Conduct or Agile Code of Ethical Conduct? Where would they find that? How can they comment on those kinds of things? And do we want them to? Yes, I think so.
Absolutely, we want them to. So first and foremost, to find it, it's the agilealliance.org website, and under Community Member Initiatives. And we're there under the initiatives, the current initiative, it's called the Agile Coaching Ethics Initiative there.
Or if you just type in Agile Alliance Coaching Ethics, you'll get the hit straight up on Google.
You'll get there straight away. Yeah.
Or your search engine of choice.
There you go. I will also have that link in the show notes.
I was going to say, yeah, if they would like to feedback on that, we have there's lots of ways they can do that. They can reach out to you alluded to before. This is whilst we're here, the three of us representing the group. It is a large group of people who have in different stages and different ways contributed to this, and that list is growing. And a lot of them are out talking about this along the way. So feel free. You can see the list of the volunteers on our page. But feel free to talk to any of those as they're talking in the community. But the easiest way is just to hit us at our email address, which is agilecoachingethics@agilealliance.org. That will, if you have some feedback, we would love to hear from you.
Can't get very much simpler than that. Gentlemen, at the end here, one of the things that I do is I ask my guests if they had a magic wand and 2 wishes. What 2 things would they change, let's say, in the world of Agile coaching ethics? What would you wave your magic wand and make go away?
The imposition of Agile by decree. Tom, you were joking about standing and reading the Scrum Guide in front of people, but we've seen Agile used as a stick to beat people with, whereas if we go back to, again, that initial intent, it was about an invitation to explore a new way of doing things. And as it's expanded outside of information technology, we're seeing the cargo cult adoptions, everybody wants to be Spotify. Well, no. Let's invite people to explore new ways of working together and do it ethically.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you there. It's what worries me is the fact that we've lost the agnostic part of it. The manifesto was very agnostic. It was the bringing together of a bunch of different frameworks at the time that existed. Some still exist now. Some have faded away, and over the last 20 years, more have come along to solve different types of problems, and the world has space for all of those. And so, this ability that if just because you learnt one way doesn't mean that way is going to be the right way either in the future or even if you move to a different organization or something. And so one of my big battles is getting people to think a little more agnostic about the way they approach things and move away from just that single framework of choice, whatever that might be, because there is a bunch of different schools of thought out there, and agility is all about finding the best one to solve the problem and in order to solve the need that we have or solve the problem that we're trying to do. That was how this thing came around in the first place. We were trying to get the one big method and look for better ways of doing things.
Super. Gentlemen, thank you very much. This has been a marvelous conversation. I think we probably will have to reconvene it. I have about a half a dozen other things I'd like to talk about, but after a time, people's ears tire, so it is time to roll forward. Shane Hastie, Craig Smith, thank you for appearing. Thank you for loaning your voice to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Thank you, John.
Tom, thanks so much for having us.
The Software Process and Measurement Cast is a proud media sponsor of the Global Scrum Master Summit. The first Global Scrum Master Summit is coming soon. Registrations will be available very soon. The summit will be held the week of May 17th, 2021. It'll be a combination of live and recorded, and it's organized by the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast and Vasco Duarte. Vasco, by the way, will be on the podcast next week. The Software Process and Measurement Cast is also a proud media sponsor of the DevOps Online Summit. DevOps professionals throughout the world come together and share their learnings at the DevOps Online Summit. This will be the week of April 26th through 30th, and it will be the third of the annual DevOps Summits. The goal is to bring together 5,000 DevOps professionals. Grab a ticket, link in the show notes. In Reread Saturday News, we read this week, Chapter 4 of Fixing Your Scrum Practical Solutions to Common Scrum Problems by Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller. I've argued that the role of the product owner is the hardest in Scrum. The role is difficult for many reasons. Todd and Ryan tackle 7 of the most pernicious anti-patterns of product ownership in Chapter 4, titled The Product Owner. If you have not bought your copy, there's a link in the show notes. Please use the link in the show notes, support the podcast, and obviously, and more importantly, the authors. In the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 642, we will have the return of Vasco Duarte. Vasco is returning to discuss the role of the Scrum Master. Scrum Masters are the face of Agile in many organizations. Helping team facilitators get the role right benefits not only the Agile community, but every business they're involved with. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?